It was raining the morning the truth walked into my kitchen. Soft rain, the kind that makes the rosemary lean toward the window and turns the street to silver. The kettle hummed. I held my blue mug with both hands and watched steam rise like a small, kind cloud. The house smelled like toast and lemon soap. Quiet, steady, familiar. A message flashed on my husband's phone where he had left it by the fruit bowl. I didn't mean to see it. I moved the phone to wipe a ring of tea from the counter and the screen lit up. 2 lines. No names. Only a small heart and words that bent the room out of shape. Last night lingered on me. The key is under the blue pot. My sister keeps a blue pot by her door. I stood very still. The kettle clicked off. The door closed somewhere on the street with a soft, polite sound. I felt the floor tilt and then steady under my feet. In that quiet, I could hear the clock above the stove, the thin tap of rain and my own breath deciding whether to speed up or slow down. It slowed. My sister's name is Lena. My husband's is Mark. I said their names out loud, soft, like you say the names of simple things, spoon, bowl, door, so they lose the power to startle you. Then I wiped the counter, set the phone where it had been, and opened the window a finger's width. New air moved through the room. I made tea I did not drink. When I called Lena, she answered on the second ring, voice bright, as if the day had already promised her something. "Can you stop by?" I asked. "Bring the blue pot." She laughed, not understanding. "The what?" "You'll see," I said. I texted Mark the same way. Tea at noon. No fuss, no drama. A table, a kettle, a window open. At 12, they came. The door's soft click, twice. 2 umbrellas leaned in the hall like polite guests. We stood at the table with cups that steamed and hands that did not know where to rest. No shouting, no swears, only the set down of a heavy thing that had been carried too long in the wrong way. Truth makes a sound when it touches wood. There was blood on the floor by the end of it, but not the kind that comes from fists. A glass slipped from a shaking hand when a lie broke in half. A small cut bloomed on a palm. I wrapped it with a clean towel and said, "Hold still," because even here, even now, I am a woman who keeps a kitchen and does not let people drip on the tile. This is the story of how the rain showed up when I needed it, how a blue pot told me what I needed to know, and how I opened a window and let the air in. I did not burn my life down. I set a table. I kept my voice even. I let the truth sit with us until it was done. I grew up in a small house on a quiet street where mornings smell like tea and wet leaves. The kitchen window looks out on a square of green and a stubborn rosemary that leans toward the light like a brave little animal. The door closes with a soft click, even when the radio is low. I keep a ring dish by the sink for the spare key and a bobby pin, and the tiny folded papers I write to steady myself. Call the plumber, buy lemons, breathe. My name is Sarah. I like simple, steady things. I work at the library desk. I know the faces of people trying to be brave without making a sound. I know how to say, "Take your time," and "You're next," so the line feels softer. At home, I keep a binder with tabs that say house, bills, health, notes. Paper helps when storms come. I am not loud. I am hard to move when I decide to love something. My husband and my sister were 2 of those somethings. Our house is another. Lena is my younger sister by 2 years. She is a bright person. She laughs easily. She makes friends at bus stops and grocery lines. As children, we made blanket forts with rules that changed every 5 minutes because she liked to change them. I would bring the flashlight and a book. She would bring a blue pot with a plastic plant in it and say, "Now it's a kitchen." And we would pretend to make soup with crayons. She kept that blue pot. Years later, she painted it a deeper blue and set succulents in it and set it by her front door when she moved into her tiny apartment. She slid a key under it because everyone needs somewhere to hide something. We teased her. "It's the oldest trick," I said. She laughed. That's why nobody will look. Mark came into my life on a day with the same light as the day everything changed. Clean, cool, kind. A bus broke down and strangers were sharing a smile like a joke. He held an umbrella over an older woman and then over me. He said, "We can be a small roof." He likes phrases like that, simple and usable. He is the kind of man who fixes a hinge without making a speech. He works in maintenance at the school, knows which doors squeak, and keeps a pencil behind his ear. He is gentle with small things. He makes pancakes on Sundays in shapes that sometimes look like letters and sometimes look like islands you can name. We had a small wedding with pie instead of cake, and a song my sister picked because she said we needed something we could hum later when we fought about towels. We moved into our house 2 months after, a place with light that knew how to lower its voice in late afternoon. Mark rubbed wax on the door latch so it would close without a tired scrape. He hung the rosemary by the window in a clay pot with a nail he set carefully. "For soup," he said, and kissed my hair. Lena was a regular in our house. She came with a bag of oranges and her shoes off and sat on the counter swinging her legs. She called Mark Mr. Fix and asked him to look at her stuck window or a shelf that leaned. He showed her how to find studs with a knuckle. She brought him a plant in a blue pot, a joke and a thank you. He placed it by our door, "For luck," he said. Then he laughed and put the key under our mat because some old tricks are not tricks, they are habits. Our family has simple rituals: soup on Wednesdays, ginger, carrot, calm, tea on Fridays if the week was hard, the window open a finger's width, unless the wind is mean. We eat at the table most nights and put our phones in a small bowl by the fruit. We listen. We are steady. Or we thought we were. There were seasons when all our rooms felt close. After our mother's small stroke, Lena moved 2 streets over to be nearer for a while. She came more, barefoot in winter socks, carrying laundry and funny stories. Mark would pick up a bag for her, set it in the corner and say, "You always pack like you're going on a boat." She would throw a dish towel at him and say, "You're the one who fixes everything." There were also small cracks. Not loud, not the kind you hear in a night full of voices. We lost Dad 2 years ago, and grief sat on our sofa like a quiet guest who did not know when to leave. I went to the library more. Mark went to the garage and sanded pieces of wood that did not need sanding. Lena went out and came home with glitter on her eyelashes and stories about how people clap for small things when they are tired. We all handled it the way we knew how. Once Mark installed a new deadbolt at Lena's place because her old lock stuck. He put a little key safe by the door and showed her how to pick a code she would not forget. He put the spare key under the blue pot, just in case, because habits are kind, until they are not. He texted me a photo of the door with the new lock and the pot in the corner and wrote, "Your sister is safer now." I sent back 3 hearts. Simple. Felt true. We share a history that is not always easy. When we were little, our father drank too much on weekends and made promises on Mondays that hung in the air like wet sheets. Our mother made soup. We learned to love the quiet between storms. We learned to forgive slowly, in threads. We learned to hold our breath until Friday and then let it go over tea. There were signs that look obvious now in the way things do when you put them in a row after you know how they end. The Saturday Mark helped Lena move a bookshelf that had been standing fine for years. The Sunday, Lena texted me a photo of a new light fixture that looked like a moon and wrote, "Mr. Fix's magic," with a heart. The afternoon, I turned off the kettle and looked out the window and saw Mark walk across the lawn with a smiling mouth I did not know he kept, carrying Lena's blue pot as if it were a thing that needed saving in a flood. He said he was bringing it for repotting. I nodded. People have plants. There were messages Lena sent me that looked like kindness and felt like a push. "You work too much," she'd say. "Let him take care of something." There were messages Mark sent me from her place. "Door fixed," he wrote. "Key safe set." I typed, "Thank you," and put my phone in the bowl and set the table because dinner does not make itself. There was the night I found a wine glass in the sink that wasn't ours. a thin stem, a faint lipstick line I knew wasn't mine. Lena was the only person I know who wears lipstick in our house on a Tuesday. She had been over that afternoon. She had brought a bag of oranges and left without her coat because the day surprised us with warmth and she ran out without thinking. I washed the glass and told myself this is what sisters do. They share sugars and dishes and secrets that are not dangerous. I put the glass away. I wiped the counter. I did not write it down. There was the evening we all went to our mother's for lasagna, and Lena arrived in a blue sweater the exact color of the pot she loves. Mark joked that he needed sunglasses, and she laughed and handed him one of her bracelets to hold for a second. I watched him slide it onto his thumb and spin it once like a person checking a coin. I collected the plates. I scolded the cat for trying to eat cheese. I did not say hands. Maybe I should have. Maybe it would have mattered. Maybe not. My sister has been left before. Her first long love packed his guitar and moved to a city 2 coasts away because he said he needed noise. She likes noise now. She likes laughing in rooms where no one knows your last name and then coming home to a kettle and one person who knows how you take your tea. It is a dangerous appetite, wanting both. Mark likes to rescue. He is good at it. He likes putting a loose board back in its place and looking at a lock and making it glide. He wants to be the man who makes a small thing better. When you put that next to someone who wants to be seen holding a broken thing, you get a light that looks like love, until you pull the curtain back and see there is no window there. I am not a detective. I do not look through phones. I put them in a bowl by the fruit and ask that they stay there during dinner because I like to see faces. If a message flashes, I try to look away. If I see it anyway, I try to breathe. People call this being naive. I call it giving rooms privacy. There is a line between privacy and secrets. I know it now more than I did then. I remember the day I bought Lena the blue pot at the flea market near the river. The vendor's fingers were stained with paint and his stories were long. "This is from a cafe," he said. "They put sugar in it once." I washed it in our sink and placed it in a towel and wrapped it like a baby. "For your door," I told her, "so you always know where home is." I did not imagine a key under it from my husband. Our house has a way of holding its breath when something is off. The radiator makes a small sigh. The clock ticks louder. The rosemary brushes the window like a gentle finger asking a question. A week before the message, the house asked. I opened the window an extra finger's width and felt the air ask back, "Are you sure you want to know?" I was not. I closed it. The morning the message flashed sat on top of other mornings like a book on a stack. I moved Mark's phone to wipe a ring of tea, and there it was. Last night lingered on me. The key is under the blue pot. No name, no punctuation, only a small heart and an old trick in plain words. I did not touch the phone again. I wiped the ring. I set it down where it had been. I opened the window. I asked the room to help me move carefully. I called Lena first because she has always been my first call for gossip, for soup recipes, for "Did you see the moon?" "Can you stop by? Bring the blue pot." She laughed, confused. "The what?" "You'll see," I said, my voice calm because if it wasn't, I wouldn't trust myself not to shout. Calm has kept me alive in rooms where shouting would have broken more than it fixed. I texted Mark, "Tea at noon." He likes tea. He likes the sound of the kettle. He likes the way steam makes rooms look softer. He does not like surprises. He walked in at 12 with his hair wet from the rain and his mouth in the shape of a man who has decided to be brave for 5 minutes and then collapse later in a private room. Lena came with her umbrella and a nervous laugh and the blue pot held in both hands like a child returning a toy she broke. Our table looked like it always does. Cups, a plate, a sprig of rosemary in a jar because I like the way it smells so close. The binder was not there. I did not need paper yet. I needed faces. I needed 2 people to say their names out loud in the same room that holds our oatmeal and our mail. I needed to put the blue pot on the table and ask, whose key is under this? There is a way to fight that does not break dishes. My mother taught me that when she stood at the stove in a house that held too much sound and stirred and did not let us eat until everyone's voice was soft. She said, start with tea, then tell the truth in short words. She also said, hold the bleeding thing with the clean towel. She said that about tomatoes and knees. It works for small cuts and bigger ones too. So I set a towel on the counter. I set 3 cups on the table. I opened the window a finger's width and felt the air ask back, are you sure you want to know? I was not. I closed it. It's true, there was blood by the end. A glass slipped from Lena's hand and cut a small line in her palm when a lie split in half and she reached without looking for something to hold. I wrapped it in a towel like I have wrapped so many small things in that kitchen. I said, hold still, because even here, even now, I am the woman who keeps a kitchen and does not let people drip on the tile. It started, though, with rain and with rosemary on the glass and with a blue pot that has been a joke in our family since we were small. It started with me asking them both to come at noon and bringing their old trick into the light. It started the way most honest things start in my life, with a kettle, a table, and a window open just enough to let the air move while we did what had to be done.
They sat where I asked them to sit, Lena at the end of the table by the window, Mark to my right where he always sits on Sundays when we have pancakes. The blue pot sat in the center on a folded tea towel, like a guest that did not know why it had been invited. Rain tapped. The kettle hummed as if it were trying to find the same note the day had woken up with. Phones, I said, and held out the small bowl where we keep them during dinner. Please. Lena blinked. What? Why? So we can hear each other, I said. No interruptions. I kept my voice soft. I have learned that softness has a way of making noisy things quieter, like a blanket on a cage. Mark placed his phone in the bowl without looking at the screen. Lena hesitated, then set hers on top, the bright case face down, like a child who has put a cookie where she was told and is waiting to see if anyone noticed that she licked it first. I poured tea. Steam rose and softened the angles of the room. We are going to speak in turns. Short sentences, one person at a time, no shouting, no swearing. If I ask you a question and you don't want to answer it yet, say not yet. But if you lie, I will pour tea and wait until the lie leaves the room. Lena laughed once, a small, brittle sound. You and your rules, she said, not unkindly. Me and my rules. I said, they have kept me alive in rooms that did not want to stay rooms. Okay. Mark said. He rubbed the back of his neck. He is the kind of man who will always fix a hinge before he takes painkillers. He looked like a hinge with no oil. Okay. I placed my hand on the blue pot. Whose key is under this? I asked. The words were plain. They landed like a spoon set gently on a table. Lena stared at the pot, then at the window, then at me. What are you talking about? You keep a key under your blue pot, I said. You always have. You told me once it's an old trick, which is why nobody would look. I am looking. Whose key is under this one? Who used it last night? Silence stretched thin and tight across the table. Rain tapped a little louder, as if the roof had leaned in. The rosemary brushed the glass. The clock above the stove made itself obvious, the way clocks do when you need them to go backwards, and they won't. I touched the edge of the towel. Lena, I said, lift it. She swallowed. She reached.
Her fingers slid under the rim and lifted the pot with both hands as if she were trying not to make any noise with clay. Underneath lay a small brass key on a square of paper towel. The key looked ordinary. That is the thing about keys. They look like little pieces of metal until they are the shape of a door in your hand. "No," Lena said too fast. No. It's a key. It opens a door. It is under the pot on my table. I am asking, whose is it?" Mark leaned forward. He had carpenter hands, scar at the knuckle, thumbnail always a little thin from scraping at old paint. He did not reach for the key. He did not look at me. He looked at Lena. I watched their eyes move around each other as if they were trying to find a corner of the room that wasn't here. "Not yet," Lena whispered. The words came out like a child using the rule she'd been given to try to win an adult game. I nodded. "Okay, not yet." I set the pot down next to it. The key stayed in sight. I poured more tea because pouring is a thing your hands can do when your chest is busy learning a new shape. "Mark," I said, "where were you last night?" He took a breath like a man practicing being honest. It didn't land. "Checking Lena's lock," he said. "The old one's stuck again." "Which old one? The old new one? Or the older old one you replaced when it stuck? Or the key safe code that needed changing?" He looked at his hands. "The knob," he said. "The whole thing needed—" "Last night lingered on me," I said, and I could feel my own mouth surprise me. I said it the way I had read it. Not accusing, not pleading, just a strip of text held up to the light. That is the first thing. The second thing is, the key is under the blue pot. Lena's face changed. Not into a confession, into a memory. She closed her eyes and opened them. "Who texted?" she asked. It sounded like a woman trying to find her way out of a maze by asking the wall for directions. "I don't need the name," I said. "I need you to sit in a room and tell the truth in a voice I recognize." I placed my palm on the table where I could feel the grain of the wood under my skin. It grounded me, the way the edge of a sink does when the knife misses the tomato and catches a finger. Lena let out a breath. "You don't understand," she began. "Explain it then," I said. "I was lonely. You've been gone. In the library, in lists, in grief. He made my door glide. He lifted things. He looked at me like I hadn't broken anything I couldn't fix." Mark swallowed. The sound was small and loud. "It wasn't love?" I said, more curious than cruel. "It wasn't disrespect?" My voice stayed calm, because if it didn't, I knew the room would break. "Is it the kind of not that breaks a house in a way you can sweep up with one broom? Or is it the kind you have to vacuum for years and still find pieces under the couch in winter?" Mark rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. He looked at me. He looked at the key again. "Sarah," he said. My name, a small boat in his mouth. I thought I could help her. "Rescue," I said. "You like rescue." He nodded. Tears were there. He held them. Lena stared at the window. The rosemary brushed the glass again like a metronome for 3 lives out of time.
"I asked him to fix things," Lena said, fast now. "A shelf, a door. A night where I didn't want to be the only person in my apartment who could hear me breathe." "And you knew where the key was," I said. "So you did not have to knock like a person who wants help without wanting somebody else's home." She flinched, honest. "I told myself you work late," she said.
I told myself he would be gone before your kettle clicked. How many times? I asked. I did not ask where. I did not ask to be made smaller by details that would only make my nights loud. I asked for a number because numbers have edges. Silence again. The rain stopped tapping and the absence of it felt like a sound. Lena looked at Mark. Mark looked at the table. I waited. I have learned to wait when a room is getting ready to do a brave thing. 4, Mark said. His voice dropped. In 2 months. 4, Lena echoed, muffled, a winter hat put over a crying mouth. I wrote it in my head because I did not have a pen. I did not want a pen. Some things you write on the surface of a day with your finger and then wash your hands and still see the shape of for a while. I poured more tea. I slid a cup toward Lena because that is what you do when someone has set something on your table that shouldn't be there. You give them something to hold that isn't heavy. She wrapped her fingers around the porcelain and breathed into it like it could warm the part of herself she had left outside for too long. Our mother always says, start with tea, I said, and for a second all 3 of us laughed. One beat, and it unbent the room a little. Now we are at the part where we tell the truth in short words. Lena wiped her eyes. I am ashamed, she said, and the way she said it made the kitchen feel safe enough to hold that word without it spilling into blame. I wanted to be the exception. I wanted to be held by someone who didn't think I changed my mind too much. I wanted a door that opened even when I didn't knock. Mark put his hands on the table like he had been given a drill and told to steady the board. I thought I could be useful, he said. I told myself if I kept it in the category of help, I was not... He stopped. The sentence didn't know how to finish without turning into humor or cruelty. He used a word that belonged to kids at school, not to a kitchen. I was wrong, he said finally. I saw blue pot, key, cup, red, faces learning how to be faces again. I heard last night lingered on me. Not yet. 4. I felt steady, sad, awake. I will do, sweep, call, make a plan I can carry tomorrow when my legs shake. I stood and looked for the dustpan. I moved slowly. I picked up the bigger pieces with my fingers, the way you do when you know where the edges are. I left the small ones for Nadia because there are some things I always let her do. Not because I can't, not because I am weak, but because the kitchen has learned that letting people help is part of the way it stays a room where you want to be. When she came at 2:30 with her quiet eyes and a broom, she stood in the doorway and looked at the towel and the pot and the key. How did it go? She asked. We told the truth, I said. A glass broke, but nothing else. She nodded. Good, she said. Shall I sweep? Yes, I said. I poured tea. We opened the window a little more. The air moved. The day held. The room remembered itself. Nadia swept the small shards like she was moving birds to a safer branch. I held the dustpan and watched the way the light made tiny prisms on the floor for a second, and then not. When the last piece was in the bin, I rinsed the towel in the sink and watched the thin red line turn to pink, and then to nothing. It looks worse than it is, I said out loud, to no one and to myself. At 4, I called our mother. I stood by the window with the rosemary and looked at the wet street while the phone rang. Make soup, she said, after the second sentence, the way our mother always solves the unsolvable. Then quieter, tell the truth without shouting. Keep the window open a finger's width. I said, I will. I said, Sunday is small chairs.
No extra ones. She said, very simply, okay. At 5, Aunt May knocked with a small 10 and a cardigan buttoned wrong. She looked at the blue pot on the towel and the key on the dish, and then at my face. We'll move slow, she said, like a blessing. She did not ask for details. She held the broom while Nadia washed the cups. It felt like a ceremony in a room that didn't need one. Mark texted at 6, at Paul's, and sent an address that wasn't a stranger's. Good, I typed back. No calls tonight. Lena's message came next, a photo of bandaged fingers and 2 words, I'm sorry. I did not answer. Not yet. I put both phones back in the bowl like I was putting away toys at the end of a day that had been too loud. When the house went quiet, I took out the binder with tabs that has saved me more times than people imagine paper can. I slid in a new page behind notes. I wrote rules at the top and underlined it once. Not for drama, for steadiness. You live elsewhere. You do not sleep here. You return all keys, no copies, no codes. You text before you come to the door. You come only at noon on Tuesdays to collect what we agree you can take. You leave by 1. You do not step into this room without me. You tell our mother yourself on Sunday. You say, I did this. You do not say we. You call a counselor on Monday. You give me the appointment time. You do not fix anything here for a while. We will live with doors that remember what you did when you touched them. My hand did not shake when I wrote. I added a line at the bottom because I know how habits beg. You do not rescue my sister. You do not rescue anyone. You sit with your own broken hinge. I called a locksmith at 8. Tomorrow morning, he said. 9. Bring a good lock, the kind that makes a crisp sound. He laughed. I know what you mean. The locksmith came on time and wore a jacket that smelled like rain. Mr. Lopez stood in the doorway and held conversation like he held the broom. Gentle, steady. The new lock slid into place with the sound that made something in my chest answer. Listen, the locksmith said, and closed the door. It clicked. Not loud. Certain. There, Mr. Lopez said. Better.
Our mother closed her eyes and opened them. Soup, she said, and we smiled because some words do not change their shape even after a storm. She ladled and we ate. She kept the window open a finger's width. You and your lists will save you, she said, and your friends, and the way you keep a kitchen. She is right about most things that matter in rooms with stoves. Lena called at 5 with her voice very small. Mom, she said, I did it. Our mother said, I know, and the way she said it made me love her more than is comfortable. No fuss, Mom added, like a benediction. Lena cried 1 clean minute and then said, okay, and hung up. That is a way to tell the truth. Not the only way, an old way. On Tuesday, I took the blue pot, cleaned and dry, and walked it to Lena's door. I set it on her stoop and slid a note under it. No keys. I did not knock. I did not ring. I went home. It felt like returning a word to a sentence that had used it wrong. Nadia came every day for a week at 9 with coffee and a list. Today we do the garage. Tomorrow, the socks, she would say. And she would stand with me while I learned the shape of my house without Mark's boots in the corner and his toolbox under the bench. We put the toolbox in the shed. We left the boots by the back door because some ghosts are useful in winter. On Wednesday, I called a counselor who does not make people lie on couches. I am tired of being steady in rooms with broken chairs, I said. She said, bring your steadiness and you're tired. We can hold both. I went on Friday and sat in a chair that did not squeak and said out loud, "I did not fail." She nodded. "Good," she said. "Say it again." I did. It helped. On Thursday night, Pastor Ruth knocked and stood on my porch and held my hand in hers with the kind of grip that does not want to own you, only anchor you for a minute. I brought a short poem and bad cookies, she said. We ate the bad cookies. She read the poem about loss that does not have to be the only word in a sentence. She looked at the new lock and said, "Good sound," and I agreed. Mark sent 3 texts in as many days. Counselor, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Told my mother, Wednesday, soup. Apartment, temporary above the hardware store. He did not send apologies. He did not send a photo of his dinner as if I needed to bless it. He sent nouns and times. This is useful. I wrote them in my binder under plan. Lena sent 2. I'm going to Aunt May for a bit, and later I am looking for a new job. Good, I wrote back to both. Do not contact him. She typed, not even, and stopped. We learn to stop. It is a skill like sweeping, muscle, motion, memory. On Saturday, I took down one photo in the hall, the one of the 3 of us under the maple at the park on the day the swing was installed, and put it in the drawer. I left the one of the 2 of us with my mother at the lake on the day she wore the hat that made her look like a soft mushroom. I moved a plant to the shelf where the photo had been. It looked fine there. It looked like a decision. You have to make a few small ones quickly after a big one, or your house forgets to breathe. The turning was not one thing. It was a series of gentle clicks, locks, pins, spoons on saucers that added up to a door that will now only open when I want it to. It was a list signed without arguments. It was a blue pot without a key under it, returned to where it belongs. It was my mother's soup on a Sunday in a home that still smelled like onion and rosemary and lemon and made a place for grief without letting it eat everything. By the end of the week, I could stand in my kitchen and hear only the sounds a kitchen should make. The kettle hummed, the rain tapped, the rosemary brushed the glass. The clock kept time that belonged to me. There was no second story running under the tiles. There was only the room remembering what it is for, feeding, talking, telling the truth in short words, and wrapping the small bleeding things in a clean towel until they decide to stop.
The week after the blue pot and the key felt like learning to walk in my own kitchen again. The kettle still hummed. The rain still tapped. The rosemary still leaned toward the glass and stood back up, brave and green. The door made a new sound, crisp, clean, and each time it closed, my chest answered. Some things were different. The room was the same room. I started with small, ordinary acts because they are the only way I know to make a shaken house remember itself. I washed the towel that had wrapped Lena's hand. The thin red line turned to pink in the sink, and then to plain water. I held the glass pieces in the dustpan and tipped them into the bin, careful, steady. I wiped the floor with warm, soapy water and watched it dry. Nothing left but tile, nothing dramatic. Blood looks worse than it is. It washes. On Monday morning, the locksmith's work felt like a blessing I could hold. The lock clicked with that quiet certainty I'd asked for. I walked the house and touched the door frames with my palm, the way you touch old trees. I said, "You are safe," out loud to the empty rooms, because I needed to hear it in my own voice. I took out the binder and slid in the page Mark had signed, Rules, with the date in the corner, neat. I added a small list for me, because keeping an honest kitchen needs both sides. Breathe before speaking. No midnight texts. Write it down, decide in daylight. Soup on Wednesdays. Window open, a finger's width. Ask for help.
Mark honored the rules the way I had hoped and doubted in the same breath. He texted nouns and times, nothing that asked me to be more than the keeper of this door. Counselor, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Moving tools, Friday, noon. Signed Templace above hardware. He came on Tuesdays at noon, stood on the mat, named the thing he had come for, and left by 1. He did not step in. He did not rescue. He took his toolbox and left the spare screws because you'll need them, he said, and I nodded and did not ask him to stay and reach for his pencil like a prayer. Lena kept her distance because I drew the line in a thick, calm hand. Aunt May sent me 2 words after the first night. She's here. Then later, small steps. I wrote back, good. I did not ask for details. I learned that being a sister in a season like this looks like making soup for our mother and letting my sister's name sit in my mouth without turning into an argument with a mirror. Our mother kept us all anchored in the only way she knows. She made soup on Sunday and kept the window open a finger's width and said, no fuss, as if that sentence could make a room choose gentleness. I told her the short version. She looked exactly at me, eyes that have seen worst and better, and said very simply, you will be okay. I choose to believe her as I have chosen her sentences when I didn't know where to put my feet. Nadia became my morning hour. She arrived at 9 with coffee and a list. Today, garage, she would say. Tomorrow, socks. We opened the old toolbox and sorted what belonged to hands that still lived here and what needed to go. We left the boots by the back door. I couldn't put them in the bag. Some ghosts hold the winter for you until spring remembers your name again. I told the people who needed telling. Pastor Ruth stood on my porch with bad cookies and a short poem. You chose light, she said. Not like a compliment, but like someone naming the color of paint. Keep choosing it. Mr. Lopez knocked with his broom and asked, you good? And I said, I will be. And he said, I'll sweep anyway. And he did. At the library, I told my manager, I need a counselor on Friday. And she said, we will cover, and brought me a stack of novels with happy endings because she knows I pretend I don't need them, and I do. The counselor's office had a chair that didn't squeak and a plant with glossy leaves. I sat and said the sentences I had rehearsed in my kitchen. I did not fail. I am not responsible for other people's doors. She nodded. You can keep saying that, she said. The brain learns by repetition. I went each week for a while. I said my truths small and plain. I cried once, the kind that feels like a safe leak, and she smiled and handed me the good tissues, not the store brand. We talked about how to hold anger without letting it drink my tea. We talked about forgiveness in threads, not blankets. We talked about teaching my hands to be still in a room that wants to move. I made a short list on the inside of the pantry door in my own round hand and taped it where only I can see it when I reach for the mugs. Love first, say the hard thing, no fuss, keep the window open, keep the lock firm. Lena called on a Thursday afternoon from Aunt May's house and asked if she could send a letter instead of a voice for a while. Yes, I said. Words on paper are less sharp. The letter came 3 days later, written in her careful hand, the one that drew pot plants with smiling faces when we were children. She wrote, I am ashamed. I am not asking. I am learning how to live in a room without noise. I can see now that the blue pot under my door was a trick I had with myself, open without asking. I am learning how to wait. At the bottom, she added, just one line. I will not come to you to make myself feel better. I will wait for the invitation. I set the letter under the lemon magnet on the fridge and looked at it every morning until my chest stopped clenching. I wrote back, good, and no keys, and I love you from here. Mark's mother called once on a Sunday after church. She wanted me to tell her it wasn't his fault. I said, he has a counselor on Tuesday at 3. He texts nouns. He signed a page that says no rescue. He is doing some slow things right. The rest is his. She sighed the sigh of a woman who raised a boy to fix things. He always wanted to be useful, she said. He can learn to be quiet. He can, I said. So can I. The separation papers moved through the rooms they always move through. Attorney, mediator, a clerk in a saw scarf. They smelled like paper and lemon. We sat in small chairs next to people with stories we did not know and nodded at forms that have their own kind of weather. We chose to move slow. We chose to keep the house with me for now. He signed a quitclaim we will file when we file the rest. He kept his toolbox. I kept the table. We split the records. He took the jazz. I kept the piano music my mother loves for Fridays when we have tea and need something soft to keep the room from going still with thinking. We made house rules for the new shape that had a lot of old in it. He texts before he rings. He stays on the mat. He does not fix. He does not touch. He takes only what we agreed. He uses his hands elsewhere. We posted the rules next to the whiteboard where I always write Soup Wednesday. It looked strange and right there, like a coat rack you didn't know you needed until winter. The hardest part wasn't the paperwork. It was the moments with no paper. The Tuesday when my hand reached for 2 cups because muscle memory is stronger than grief. The Thursday when I saw a pencil behind a stranger's ear at the hardware store and my chest did that small surprised pain. The Sunday when the maple at the park gave me a shadow the shape of our 3 bodies and I had to choose to step out of it. Each time I stood at my sink, opened the window a finger's width, and let fresh air move in. I made tea. I told myself out loud, "You are in your kitchen. You are safe." There were kindnesses. Mrs. Chang left oranges on my step. Mr. Lopez fixed a neighbor's hinge with Mark's borrowed screwdriver and returned it with a note. Good tool, clean cut. Pastor Ruth's bad cookies got slightly better. Nadia sat on my floor on the hard days and told me stories about her mother's garden until my breathing came back to the right rhythm. The house changed slowly with me. I moved the photo of the 3 of us under the maple into a box in the closet. I left the picture of my sister and me at the lake and thought, someday. I put a plant where the photo had been. It thrived without being asked for anything but water. It felt like a good sign. I saw a small shadow on Lena's palm when we met in a park with Aunt May 3 weeks later. Not in my kitchen, not at our mother's table. A tiny line where the glass had kissed her. It will fade, she said, and smiled the shy smile she had when we were 8 and got away with licking the cake batter without getting caught. It will, I said. You too. We sat on a bench and did not turn it into a movie. We looked at ducks. We said the small things we could handle. We stood after 20 minutes and hugged like careful people who know they are made of breakable and want to keep the pieces. I went home to my quiet house and did not cry. Progress is strange and small and easy to miss if you don't keep a list. I taught myself to forgive in threads. I wrote that phrase on the whiteboard under Soup Wednesday and we laughed because having forgiven threads next to carrots makes something solemn friendly. When my chest loosened, I tied a thread around that day in my mind and said, "This counts." When it tightened, I told myself, "You can add a stitch later." I did not put a date on forgiveness because that would turn it into a project, and projects can make a house feel like a task instead of a place to rest. Some nights were still loud. The memory of reading those words on a bright screen would slip into the room and ask to sit with me. It would whisper, "Last night lingered on me." I would nod like a person who believes in telling even a memory, "Not now." I would make herbal tea and turn on the small lamp and read a happy ending on purpose. I would breathe. The sentence would leave because rooms won't hold words that aren't said. I wrote my own short note and put it in the ring dish under the keys just for me. It said, "You did not fail. You kept the kitchen a kitchen." Some mornings I take it out and read it before I reach for the kettle. Some mornings I forget and the day is fine anyway.
Lena found a new apartment above a place that makes soup in summer and ice in winter. She sent Aunt May a photo of a pot on a windowsill, not blue, green. No keys under, she texted me with a picture of her clean doormat. Good, I wrote back. Keep it that way. She sent a heart and left me alone for another week on purpose, because learning is sometimes leaving people alone, even when you want them to hold your hand. Mark learned how not to rescue in a way that looks like almost nothing if you don't know what it means. A neighbor's porch light went out. He recommended the hardware store. He did not get his ladder. A cousin called with a car noise. He gave a mechanic's number. He did not show up. He went to his counselor on Tuesdays and sent me 2 words: went, stayed. And I wrote them in my binder under plan, not because I need to supervise his life, but because the act of writing makes me believe in slow verbs. He met with our mediator and he signed the papers without rolling his eyes. He bought himself a new pencil and uses it to take notes on rules he did not write. People can learn. He is learning. I learned to ask for help out loud without apologizing. I asked Mr. Lopez to carry a box to the shed. I asked Pastor Ruth to bring too many cookies so I could feel like a person who has too many cookies just because someone wanted me to. I asked Nadia to sit on the floor and tell me a joke about her mother's garden. I asked a counselor to say you did not fail. And I said it until my tongue was tired and my chest believed it. One evening, the rain came heavy enough to make the gutter speak. I made soup. I lit the small lamp. I set 1 cup on the table and held it with both hands. The window was open a finger's width. The rosemary leaned in. I closed my eyes and said thank you to the room. I set the blue pot, cleaned and empty, on a high shelf in the garage where it could be a story without being a trap. I wrote "no keys" on a piece of tape and stuck it on the bottom, and I laughed because sometimes you have to put a label on a lesson or you will forget and put sugar in the salt jar later. The house began to feel like itself again. It remembered it was a place where people eat quietly and tell the truth in short words, and wash towels and sweep up small messes and sit with big ones until they become smaller. It remembered that blood belongs in bodies and tea belongs in cups and keys belong on a hook or in an envelope and not under a pot. It remembered that locks should make crisp sounds when they close and that windows should open a finger's width to let air do some of the work. I did not burn my life down. I did not let anyone break my dishes. I set a table. I poured tea. I held a towel. I changed a lock. I moved a photo. I wrote rules. I asked for help. I let the rain do what rain does, clean and make everything smell like the morning belongs to me again. When I stand at the sink now and look at the glass, I see a woman holding her own house. I see a sister who loves from a distance without letting the distance become a door that will never open again. I see a wife in a season of separating who did not make a scene, but made a plan. I see a kitchen that kept itself a kitchen even when the room wanted to forget and turn into a courtroom. The kettle hums. The window opens and closes. The rosemary grows. The ring dish holds only keys that belong here. The blue pot is a pot again. The cut on Lena's palm is a pale line now. The edges of grief are less sharp. The rule on the whiteboard, forgive in threads, is still there. On some days, I add a small stitch, and on some, I let it be.
We are not done. We are enough for today. We are a kitchen.
Some mornings still begin with rain. It taps the kitchen window in that soft way, like someone who knows the house. The kettle hums. The rosemary leans toward the glass and then stands up again, brave and green. I open the window a finger's width and let the good air in. The room feels like itself, not the same as before. Houses keep what happens in them, but kind. The new lock makes its crisp, clean sound. The ring dish holds only the keys that belong here. The blue pot sits on a high shelf in the garage with a small piece of tape on the bottom that reads, "No keys." I wrote it for me as much as for anyone. There is space on the hall wall where a photo used to be. There is a plant there now. It asks for water and nothing else. There's a folded letter from my sister under the lemon magnet that says, "I will wait for the invitation." There's a page in my binder with Mark's clean signature under rules and a date in the corner that reminds me the turning happened and held. The days have their small anchors again. Soup on Wednesdays, tea on Fridays if the week was hard. The whiteboard by the pantry with ordinary lines, groceries, bills, forgive in threads. Pastor Ruth's cookies are a little better now. Mr. Lopez sweeps for the pleasure of the sound. Mrs. Chang leaves oranges that smell like small suns. Nadia sits on the floor on hard afternoons and tells me a joke about her mother's garden until my breath remembers it has a rhythm. Mark keeps to the mat and the clock. He sends nouns and times, not sentences with hooks. Tools, noon. Lee signed, counselor, Tuesday. He reads the rules with his new pencil and learns how to be a man whose hands are quiet. He is not my husband in this kitchen anymore. He is a person outside the door, learning how doors work. Lena keeps to the distance she promised. She lives over a shop that makes soup in summer and ice in winter. She texts Aunt May, not me. She writes me letters, not apologies with a timeline. We met once at the park, sat on a bench, and looked at ducks. We spoke 20 minutes and then named it enough. The cut on her palm is a pale line now. It will fade. So will the worst of this, not because we are careless, but because we are careful. On Sundays, our mother makes soup and keeps her window open a finger's width and says, "No fuss," and we do our best to obey. She does not choose sides. She told us both separately, "You were loved before this and after this." She told me, "You will be okay." I have decided to believe her as a practice. I keep a small card in the ring dish, just for me. It says, "You did not fail. You kept the kitchen a kitchen." Some mornings I take it out and read it before I lift the kettle. On others, the day is fine without it. I add a stitch to forgiveness when I can and leave the needle on the ledge when I cannot. Threads hold better than grand gestures. They are quiet. They last. People ask me in careful voices what I learned. I tell them a short list, the kind you can tape inside a cabinet and find in the dark. Start with tea. Tell the truth in short words. Keep the window open a finger's width. Change the lock without apology. Write it down. Decide in daylight. Ask for help. Let people stand near. Forgive in threads, not blankets. Keep soup on Wednesdays. It looks small written down. It is enough. It kept me from breaking the dishes. It kept this room a room. Sometimes late, I stand by the sink and look at the blue shelf where the pot used to be and remember the day I slid the key onto the dish and said, "This is evidence we can tell the truth without breaking things." We did. A glass broke. We swept. A small line of blood washed away in the sink and left only water. The rest, the hard part, sat in chairs and spoke its name.
The house listened and remembered itself. I do not pretend the ache is gone. A sentence will come back sometimes uninvited. Last night lingered on me, and I will feel the old tilt. I put the kettle on. I open the window. I say softly, "Not now." The sentence leaves. The water boils. I pour. This is what healing looks like in a kitchen. Movement you can make on a day when you are tired, rules you can follow when you are sad, breath you can hear when other people's voices get quiet. On the first big rain of spring, I opened the window and watched drops stitch silver lines on the glass. The lock clicked, crisp and sure. The rosemary leaned close and made the air smell clean. I set one cup on the table and held it with both hands. I said thank you to the room, to the rain, to the friends who stood in my doorway with brooms and poems, to the mother who keeps soup and quiet in the same pot, to the woman I am now who kept her house, her voice, and her lists. I didn't burn my life down. I didn't make a scene. I set a table. I poured tea. I wrapped a bleeding hand. I changed a lock. I moved a photo. I wrote rules. I asked for help. I let the truth sit with us until it was done. The door makes its kind sound. The window opens. The rosemary grows. I am a kitchen keeper. I am okay.